Welcome to the Cinematologist podcast. I'm Dario Linares, and down the line, of course, is the enigmatic Neil Fox.
Thank you very much, the mercurial Dario Linares.
Sorry, we're gonna have to stop this because it's just gonna get really.
That's a little what the kids call Easter eggs for our listeners from the previous episode. But it's always nice to be nice, isn't it? So
it is indeed. It's good to speak to you. I've just been thinking about all the films I've got to watch. Because with the end of year discussion coming up, I feel like I haven't watched as much as I could have done, and I mean there's some big things have come out recently, but also just catching up with some stuff throughout the year. How are you? What are you up to at the moment?
Kind of the same, really. I'm just trying to get to the end of the academic year. I'm pretty much where I want to be in terms of the films that I want to have seen by the end of year show.
Oh, cool.
There's a few little ones, Atlantics and The Report.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they've just come up on the streaming services, so I'm looking forward to catching those, just to kind of chat about, particularly Atlantics. I think is going to feature quite highly. What's on your list for catching?
Yeah, I do want to see. I mean, I did watch The Irishman finally, so maybe we can have a chat about that at some point and put it on the bonus, maybe, because there's a lot to say about that. I did love it.
Me too,
I have to
yeah,
say,
me too.
I really loved it, and I kind of want to say I want to be an evangelical about it, just to almost as a political decision in a way. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to get into that now. But I do want to see. Marriage Story.
Yeah, that'll be on Netflix before we tape anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, and I want to catch up with. I do want to see Happy as Lazaro. I did see Hale County this evening, which I love.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. I mean, that could be up there on my end of year best.
It's in my 10 at the moment.
Yeah, it could be up there because I just think it's doing. I'm really getting more into lauding films that are doing something that I kind of haven't seen much of before, or haven't seen at all before, and I think that does things that are so interesting and important with certain genres that I think is really, really good. So yeah, those are things that I want to catch up with in the next week or so. I've got my list somewhere, but I won't go through it now.
Great stuff.
Because I do want to talk to you about today's episode, which is these short interviews that I taped at Filmstock Festival. So I was thinking about what to ask you about this, because obviously this is something that's dear to your heart. You've come back to it after a 10-year hiatus. So why do you start by giving us a little bit of a sort of history of the festival? Why did you start it originally, and what were your sort of memories of that period of its development?
So I'm from Luton, which a lot of people know. I talk about it a lot. I'm very proud of that fact, and I think we'll probably come back to that later in terms of the Lutonness of it all. But I met Justin Doherty, who I do Filmstock with, and who I make films with. He directed Wilderness, the feature that I wrote, and it was a weird thing, really. I was studying film at university. Justin and I met at sixth form college, and then I went off to university, and he stayed to work at the sixth form. And towards the end of my second year, I contacted him because I needed to do a bit of editing for a presentation. I was doing a presentation on mockumentary in the documentary module, and I said I wanted to edit some clips from The Simpsons and Spinal Tap. And I knew he was working at the college as a technician. So I went in, and we hadn't seen each other for a while. And on the wall of his office was this thing that just said Filmstock Luton Film Festival. And I was like, wow, that sounds great. And I lived in Luton. I didn't move to London to study at Middlesex. I lived there and sort of commuted in. And I was like, wow, this sounds great. What's that? And he was like, well, it's just an idea. It's just a logo. I've been watching a lot of Woodstock and thought it would be cool if Luton had a film festival. And I was like, yeah, that would be really cool. Kind of like, who are you doing it with? And he's like, literally, we don't have, it's just a logo, And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And I went home and started thinking, yeah, why don't we have a film festival? Like every time we go to London to see gigs, or we go to the London Film Festival, there's always people on the train from Luton. Like we were always having to leave to do cool stuff. Why can't we do something cool in the town? So I phoned him the next day and said, if you want to do it, I'm in. Like let's do it. And I was 19 and he was 18 at the time or something. And then that was sort of late 98, and we started up working on it in early 99 with a view to doing the first event in 2000. The first event was a 15-day festival.
Jesus Christ.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah. Which was utter madness, but we were like, but you're 19, you don't care. Do you know what I mean? You're like,
yeah.
And it wasn't...
Move over, Berlin.
yeah. Cannes only 13 days, so let's go 15 days. And that literally was... We kind of joke about it. You look at our kind of who we were going to kind of get in contact with, who was going to support the festival in the first year, and it's hilarious. All these sponsors and all these guests, and I went to Cicalia Productions, Scorsese's production company, when I went to New York in 1999, and kind of stalked him out, trying to get him to just say something about Luton. Because I thought he's going to want to know that we're running this film festival and it's going to be amazing. So the first year was, kind of just, we thought we'll just do it and we'll see what goes on. And it was great. There was two highlights. One was Ray Harryhausen came, and it was incredible, and he brought the Medusa, and he brought a skeleton, and he brought loads of stuff. It was just, fabulous, a fabulous afternoon in his company. And the other thing was that someone had seen that we were kind of doing comedy, and that I think we were screening Duck Soup, and said, would you be interested in seeing this pilot of an Abbott and Costello print on 16mm? That's never been screened. It's just been in a vault. It literally never been seen. This, and it's where a lot of their famous sketches, particularly the Slowly I Turn sketch, came from. And that was amazing. Literally, when we opened the print container, that was pristine 1920 something. Print never been played. So those were the things that, like, wow, this is what we want to be doing, And also the other thing that happened that year was we opened the short film program up to international filmmakers, almost by accident, because we were contacted by one and said, "Are you accepting international shorts?" And we thought there'd only be a few British filmmakers who'd be interested in. And we were like, yeah, sure. And she came to the festival. Her name was Lisa France. She now releases films she makes films under the Ava DuVernay Array Now banner. And she came, and it just kind of made us realise, actually, maybe we should be thinking about this being the festival. And over the years, that's what grew, was the independent stuff, working to get a good programme and getting independent filmmakers there. Because Luton's got a multiplex, and so a lot of the stuff we were showing as retrospective was okay, but we knew that what our audience started to grow to really want was these independent films that they would not see anywhere else. And that became sort of midway through the staple of the festival, and we started to develop a reputation about looking after filmmakers and being a place where you would just have a really, really good time, and you'd be really appreciated for making a film, and you'd have interesting questions from other filmmakers, but also this audience who most people would assume a Luton audience would be, like they assume you Luton to be, pretty stupid and not interesting. But we knew we had a really, really great audience, and that's where we kind of focused our energy, and that's where it kind of grew. And we had a lot of filmmakers come through the festival that would then go on to other things. And I guess the most notable one in terms of relationship with the festival was Jason Reitman, who had a short in the second year. And then we contacted him to screen Thank You for Smoking as an opening film, and he remembered the festival and was like, yeah. And he told 20th Century Fox that he wanted to come to Luton, and they were like, you don't want to go to Luton? He's like, no, I want to go to this festival because they screened my film 6 years ago. And he came to Luton. We played arcade games in a Namco while the film was on. And then with Up in the Air, he gave us Up in the Air again and did a really lovely video intro from Cannes. So it was one of those things that the dedication to filmmakers and to a non-hierarchical festival where the audience, the team, and the filmmakers, we all hang out, we all watch movies, and we all have a good time. That's what the festival reputation was, and we did it for 10 years, and we finished in 2009.
Fantastic. And then obviously you've come back in 2019. So was that basically just because of the 10-year anniversary, or were you just kind of like mooting, bringing it back with Justin for a while, or what was that conversation?
The 2019 thing was a nice thing to aim for, and in the last couple of years, we'd always talked about it, and Justin's always joking about, let's just do Filmstock next year, kind of quarter serious, mostly not because of the work, but over the last couple of years. When we made Wilderness, we realised that we missed working together, and we just enjoyed that, and so that was part of it. And just kind of missing that relationship of working with each other was a big part of it. Things had changed in Luton in terms of some of the people that knew the festival and supported the festival back in the day from a lower level were now in higher levels of different organisations, which could give us the core-based funding, which we never had before, and would have made it much easier to say yes, knowing that pretty much the basic festival was already covered. The venues had changed, so the venues that we use this time are a community charity space called Youthscape, which is an amazing space, wasn't there. Justin didn't have the Bear Club, so we had ownership of venues this time that we wouldn't have had before. And then last year, there's another little film festival in Luton called Butte Street Film Festival, which was given the title in a local article of being called Luton's first film festival, which was annoying in itself, just from bad journalism. But what was really amazing was just I heard about that because of the response of Luton people who'd seen it online and were like, no, this Filmstock was amazing, Filmstock was this thing, and they really, and it was like, oh, they still remember it, and with all those sort of things circulating, it was like, okay, maybe we look into it. So we did a little email to filmmakers and friends that from the past and said, how would you feel if we brought it back? And they were like, yeah, we'd love it, we'd come. So we thought, okay, we'll give it a go, and we thought we'd test the water with a return event in 2019.
Thanks for having me be involved. I really enjoyed the time there. I really got that sense of, the community aspect of the festival, and the fact that it is film, but it's also kind of like, what are we interested in as humans? You know what I mean? It's like art and culture and music and conversation. And like, it's one of the few festivals that I've been to, or conferences, for that matter, where I didn't feel like anybody was left sort of on their own. Do you know what I mean? In a corner. Everybody, because you were there sort of most of the time, and sort of Justin was in and out for other reasons as well. So, I mean, obviously he was there most of the time, but it was just fantastic to see that. And also the films that have been chosen, obviously at all festivals there's sort of things to your taste or things that you don't rate as much as other things that you do rate and stuff. But I think everything that was programmed, you could see why it was programmed and what it was trying to do, whether it's something that was sort of political or was speaking to questions of identity was a big theme, of course. But then just interesting aesthetic filmmakers, people making weird shit that you were like, what is that? You know what I mean? But, you were glad that you'd seen it. And then, of course, the sort of the big Q&As and the big films as well. I mean, I saw back-to-back, I saw the two documentaries, Wrestle, which I loved because it really spoke to me about sports documentaries and that kind of thing. Then there was The Man Who Wanted to Fly, which I didn't know anything about, really. It was just a really sort of sweet and interesting, sort of a yarn in a way, of this guy sort of dream, this old guy who wanted to become a pilot, and, this Irish fella, and then made by Irish filmmakers, and that sort of brought that sensibility that you could laugh sort of along with some of the things that were going on that, in other hands you would be like, oh, that's a bit stereotypical, but it was kind of like, really amusing. And then stuff that I'd seen before, The Ballad of Shirley Collins, which I know you love to death, and then Milford Gray's Full Mantis, which I really want to see. It's one I haven't seen yet. I didn't get a chance at the festival. And of course, sounding like 007, Bunch of Kunst, which we were lucky enough to speak to Christine Franz, who did the Q&A for the screening, but then I spoke to her as part of the interviews that I've done, which was really great. So an amazing program. You must be really sort of proud of that.
Yeah, no, I am. Thank you. And yeah, I'm pleased you had a good time and enjoyed it. Just I wouldn't have done it if you couldn't have been there, and in the sense that just because you're one of my best friends, and I love hanging out with you, but more that one of the things we had was what's Filmstock going to be? Well, it's not going to. We don't want to do what we did 10 years ago, because we're not the same people we were 10 years ago, and the Bear Club being such a big part of it was because Justin built this amazing jazz club with his bare hands, and that's been a huge part of the last 5 years of his life. So it has to have a central place. The podcast is a huge part of mine. Music documentaries, which was a strand which you mentioned, and these filmmakers that came were people that I'd met most of them I'd met in the interim, and it felt like an opportunity to go and kind of show people what we've been doing for 10 years, as much as the program. I'm really pleased that you say that, because that's our ethos has always been, we watch everything, me and Justin, so that we can stand by everything. And people have asked in the past, why did you show that? And we know why. Both of us know why, and it might not always be obvious, but there is a reason why everything's in the program. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's quite a high quality program that people remark on, in terms of how few misses, for want of a better phrase, there are. But also that you could walk into a program at Filmstock, or you could walk onto any day of Filmstock and get a sense of what the whole thing is. I don't like going to a festival where they're like, these are the comedy shorts, and these are the horror shorts, and these are the weird shorts. It's like, I'm thinking like a Lutonian. Do you know what I mean? If you're in town and you're persuaded by someone, come in for an hour and a half and just watch some movies. I want them to get a sense of everything and know that in 10 minutes there might be another one on they like. So those sort of things are the things that we try to retain. And an evening where you watch Wrestle, this kind of high octane, high budget, well, not high budget, but high aesthetic American sports doc, and then you watch this Yarn, and I think Yarn's a great phrase for the man who wanted to fly, and and then Bunch of Kunst is the Sleaford Mods film is playing really loudly in a jazz club, and everyone's getting absolutely smashed. That to me is what a festival should be, and it was good that it was good. It was nice for me to to have you there, because you didn't know me then. And a lot of people that were there didn't know me then, and they're seeing part of who I was before come out again, and that was really nice to share that side of me, which hasn't been shared for a decade.
Yeah, B was taking the piss, saying that Justin's your first love, and I'm just a late comer to the Neil Fox party. You see, in bromance land.
Oh, you're both very special to me.
No, don't worry, Neil. I know that I'm there in your heart. So we've got 5 interviews to come. So what I'm going to do, Neil, is I'm going to tell you the order of the interviews, and I want you to give a kind of one-liner on each person, or
sure,
mention what they showed or who they are, and and just very, very quickly, just so that everybody knows what's to come. So first up, we have Dan Schneidkraut.
So Dan Schneidkraut is a filmmaker from Minneapolis / Colorado, who he had a few films at Filmstock the first time round. He's one of my favourite filmmakers in the world. I just think he's incredible, and just a really wonderful human being. So it was a pleasure to have him back. He had 3 films at this year's festival, and they were all great, and they played in 3 different programs. So yeah.
Yep, echo that. Really had a good time talking to Dan, and hopefully he's going to put us in touch with some contacts in America, which will be exciting. And then we have Christine Franz, who we mentioned previously.
Yeah, Christine directed the Sleaford Mods film Bunch of Kunst. I met her. I got in touch with her writing a piece on the film for our friend Marbell and his site director's notes, and we just sort of hit it off. And I was so pleased that she was there, and she was on the jury as well for the doc. So great to show that film.
And after that, we have younger filmmaker Toby Matthews.
Toby is a graduate of Falmouth University in the summer. So he's just graduated, and his film Holiday is a wonderful 10-minute 16mm Jacques Tati inspired short. And just a note on Toby and Rose Mahood, Rose Idale, whose films played at the festival. They were there the whole weekend, and he talked to everybody, he engaged with everyone. I was like, this is the kind of filmmaker you want to support with a festival like ours, where he's just again, he's interested, he's interesting, he's talking to everyone. It was really great, as from a lecturer point of view, to see him be so engaged with the festival, and so just really lovely. A kind of one of those investments you make in people that you think that you sort of see pay off in a nice way for them, which was great.
Yep. And Holiday, of course, his film won a prize.
It did.
It won the best short. Did
it won the Youth Jury Award.
Youth Jury Award, that was it.
Yeah, so which was great because I didn't even know till they announced it, so that was really nice.
Brilliant. And then next up we have Gillian Harker.
So Gillian is a Lutonian like myself, and she's been on the pod from way back.
Yeah,
she's an
episode 2, I think.
Second one, episode 2, yeah. Actress turned filmmaker, and this was her first directorial effort called Cross, which is a really, really good film. One of those films where you see a film by a friend and you're like, how's this going to go?
Thankfully.
But it's great. It's really great. We wouldn't have put it on if we didn't think that. Really good piece of work. And Jill's a big fan of the podcast as well, so it's nice to have her on talking about her work rather than.
And a Patreon subscriber.
She is as well. So
thank you very much, Gillian, for that continued support. Absolutely. We really do appreciate that. And finally, we have Edwin Miles.
Edwin is another former graduate, but the film we showed is his MA film, which is about his grandmother, and he played in the program with one of Dan Schneidkraut's films called Father's Day, and just really beautifully observed documentary about his grandmother following her 93rd birthday when she finds out she's got terminal illness. It could be mawkish, it could be sentimental, but he's just a really good filmmaker, and the subject, there's some really interesting things that she talks about in terms of impending mortality and things like that. It's really lovely and really well handled. And again, just great to have Edwin around for the whole weekend talking about his work as a filmmaker, and seeing that growth in a graduate is really exciting.
Awesome. So that's what you've got to look forward to. So I hope you enjoyed those interviews, and we'll speak to you in a little while. So I'm joined now on the Cinematologist podcast by Dan Schneidkraut. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I didn't sleep very well last night, and that's as close as I ever get to being drunk, so that might make this really interesting.
Well, did you stay for the Schlockfest at the film Schlock?
I didn't make it all the way through the Uwe Boll. I knew where it was going. I could guess. I've sat through other Uwe Boll films, so.
Yeah. You get to 45 minutes in, and it's like a kind of message here.
Yeah.
But your films, Neil's screening 3 of them, which we'll talk about, or at least 2 that I've seen. But you have been an attendee of Filmstock in the past, so what's it like to be back at this festival?
It's great. I love these people. They're Neil and Justin are 2 of my favorite people that I've ever encountered, and they've always been very supportive. I think we're like kindred spirits. We both just we love film, and we love challenging film, and they were one of the few festivals that had any interest in my first feature and my early shorts, which were far from being like entertainment. They're on the video art end of things, very conceptual,
right.
Not necessarily easy to watch, and I was very grateful that they saw some value in what I had to say back then, and then made it out here. We became good friends, and it's really cool to be back in Luton.
Great.
Yeah.
And you've got a really prolific back catalogue, or oeuvre, as we might say, for being really pretentious. But I was really interested in sort of, we'll talk about, as you say, the sort of sensibility of your films, but I was really fascinated to sort of think about what got you into filmmaking. Are you a film school graduate, or did you get into film in a different direction?
I never went to school for film. My main education was through my dad, who's featured in some of the films. He was a cinephile, and introduced me to a lot of important films at a really young age. Like, I remember being small, like 8 years old, and watching like Wages of Fear and Carol Reed movies and stuff, like things that were way over my head when I was a kid, and The Godfather and all those things. And I don't know if I was ready for any of that, but it made an impression. And always having films in the house and having discussions about films and art in general probably got me interested at a young age, or got into my subconscious somehow. And then I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, which the university there has a famous film program. The head of the film program when I was a kid was Stan Brakhage, a seminal experimental filmmaker. And he would have programs on Sundays where he would show rare things that he made or his friends made, people like Ken Jacobs and Jonas Mekas and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then students, other things you wouldn't see other places, and he would speak about film. And again, all of that was like a little bit above my head, but it still resonated, and it was really interesting, and I was always drawn to those things, even if I didn't entirely understand.
It's amazing how many cinephiles have that experience where they've been introduced to something and just said, watch this, and not really having it explained, but like it sparks something curious rather than just being, shown mainstream movies for fun kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, they make things that haunt you, and you figure out that that films can speak to your subconscious in a way and stick with you in a way that you can't even articulate,
I think that's absolutely right. And you've got so the first film that I saw yesterday, which you were talking about, was Father's Day, which is a very sort of personal film. Obviously, it's kind of about your father, but I think it relates to some of the interest that you have in terms of this notion of where that relates to sort of American culture. So I don't know, do you want to set up the sort of background to that film?
Well, the film began just because I was shooting a totally unrelated film in Colorado, and it happened to be during the Father's Day holiday. I don't know if you guys have the same.
Yeah. I don't think it's the same day in the UK, but we do have.
Yeah. So I hadn't seen my dad for a while. I had the camera there. I'd filmed him. I'd already made a feature documentary and he was the center of it. And so I had my camera there already. We were spending the day together, Father's Day, going to get coffee. And in recent conversations, we've been speaking a lot about mortality and his friends dying. And I kind of secretly was hoping that would continue while we did things during the day. Like I would get a sense of where his mind was regarding death, mortality, his friends, all of these things. And he sort of like very naturally went there when we were, I was just following with the camera to coffee, and all of his friends were talking about death trivia and things like that.
Sure.
We just we spent time together, and how that relates to American experience is that he's dealing with a lot of angst in regards to his business, and he works in the music business, and the way capitalism works in America is that things like that are not particularly valued. Things that I would consider a sacred place
Sure.
are not very valuable to the progress of capitalism, especially when formats are changing with music and all
Sure.
of those things. So there's always this undercurrent of capitalistic anxiety happening there, and through the process of the film, I was also spending time in this community that had died, that was sort of a collective community in the plains of Colorado that had formed really organically in an interesting way. And that's not the documentary I'm making, so I can't speak about it as much as I would like, but I saw all these parallels between my dad's experience, his store dying, and the dying of this community out there, and then simultaneously these meditations on mortality.
And it's interesting, there's inferences, I think, to going right back to, I don't know, literary influences like Steinbeck or something like that, all the way through to, what's going on politically in the United States right now. And it seems like there's a real, in this sort of much more poetic sense in terms of the film, you're not asking those questions, but these issues seem to be bubbling under in your relationship, but also the way you're shooting, and you've got these amazing sort of wide shots of the planes, and that there's that sort of very sort of washed out lighting. It gives you those sort of aesthetic senses, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was even thinking about that when it happened, but it's the specter of all of the politics of the United States are are there in the films. It's impossible to ignore this intense anxiety we feel just being Americans and trying to survive in the current environment.
Yeah. And coming back from your father and his kind of mentality and his sensibility, coming from music and stuff like that, it's a very different kind of reaction to the one that we see in the news, very angry about, say, the loss of American industry and all that kind of thing. He seems to be much more almost sort of bittersweet about it, wistful, accepting, but also nostalgic about what once was, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's reaching a point, like, he through a lot of his life, he had fight in him, and now he's becoming resigned to the inevitability of the failure of his business, his own death, the death of his friends, which in some ways is like really healthy, but as a slightly younger person, it's hard for me to come to terms with him getting to that place in his life. So I think maybe with this film, it was like my way of reaching some sort of peace or catharsis with the idea that he's kind of ready to die and kind of ready to give up his business,
Yeah. I've spoken to a couple of filmmakers who I think are in the same, I don't want to say category because I'm going to speak outside of categories now, but I wouldn't consider you, and maybe you have your own thoughts on this, about the notion of a fictional filmmaker and a documentary filmmaker. Yeah. And I think that you are sort of dealing with sort of documentary tropes and sort of ideas that are associated with documentary. But I just wondered whether you see yourself as part of this almost critique of the very idea of what documentary does in its classical form, i.e. trying to get to an objective notion of truth. It seems to me that you're dealing with much more sort of subjective notions of what reality is and what it means to be human and all these questions.
Yes, I mean, if you've ever read Herzog's Minnesota Declaration, that's a thing that resonates with me. I think the idea of accounting for facts, it doesn't make for interesting filmmaking.
Yeah.
I do believe exactly as he says that there's a deeper truth, and I'm seeking the same thing. It resonates with me. I want ecstatic truth. I mean it, but I will make editorial decisions that if you're a journalist, for example, you would never make.
Yeah.
But it's all very sincere and it's done with intention, but I think it's the idea that you can find any sort of objective truth is ridiculous.
Do you not find as well, and I'm always thinking through this, there's a paradox then, because if you take that to the logical conclusion, you get post-truth, fake news, everything's a lie, so it's kind of paradoxical, isn't it, in a way?
Well, my oversimplification of how you deal with that paradox is that you just have to mean it, you know what I mean?
Okay.
If your intention is sinister or dubious, then you're making something that's morally awful, But and that's the difference between fake news and like trying to actually bring someone more in touch with the human experience.
Yeah,
we have complete opposite intentions,
Yeah.
I hope that someone leaves understanding on a subconscious level something more about their human experience or my human experience or my dad's.
Yeah. And so I suppose it just become an ethical intentionality, doesn't it? And you have to take the filmmaker or whoever's speaking at their word, and then obviously you look at somebody like the T word, I won't say it, but there's clearly bad faith going on there, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, if you're a terrible person, you're going to create a terrible narrative, and that's what we're dealing with right now, obviously. But I try not to think about these things too much. I become more of an intuitive filmmaker, and I just try to take the films where I think they ought to go, or where they'll be the most effective, and serve the purpose that I need them to serve.
And you can see that very clearly, I think, in terms of the shooting at the OK Corral, which I really enjoyed, and it was one of those films that sort of grew on me as it went along, because I was kind of like, I'm not sure what this is, and then when it sort of moved into the, you realised it's a sort of critique of the theme park nature of American culture in many ways, or the West anyway. It's a fascinating film. So tell us about what drove this piece of work.
Well, it has a similar story, which is that I was working on I was working as a DP for another film that's about the origin of Wyatt Earp and how he built his own mythology and stuff. My friend Mike Plant made that film. It's called With Him Came the West. But I had all this leftover footage that I liked, and the experience there was very paradoxical. It was like super entertaining and interesting, but also like the same anxiety that we were speaking about earlier exists there, and it's very intense because it's a place where, you know, you can see this kind of fun, entertaining replication of a historical event that may or may not be accurate over and over every day, which is charming, right? But then there's all these political implications to it because it's law enforcement murdering people in cold blood, which is still happening right now, and there's a huge section of the U.S. population that still celebrates that and supports it, and they go to this place and enjoy it in a way that feels terribly obscene, you know. Like there's I called it a redneck Renaissance festival. I don't know if you have Renaissance festivals here, but they dress up. These grown men dress up as cowboys and have revolvers on their hip that are loaded, and like to pretend that they're in the Old West and that they're fighting for justice, and they really believe these things. Like their political agenda is absolutely in line with this, which is like there's good and bad, and there's the arbiters of justice, and they can't possibly be wrong, and there's heroes and all these things, all these binary ideas of how morality works, and you can just see it there in very sharp relief, and it's disturbing as hell. And the whole time we were in Arizona, like we had weird run-ins with people. Like it's definitely a place where real outlaw type of people, like drug dealers and bikers and stuff, were kind of sizing us up because we had like film equipment and things. And then we were stopped several times by Border Patrol, which is disturbing. Like it feels like the SS, you know, just stopping you out of nowhere, checking your car, all these things. And you know, if you live near the border, Arizona, you know, that is just a reality now, and it's really upsetting. So it was interesting to explore how this place can be really fun and really interesting and fascinating, but then also like make you absolutely sick to your stomach, because there's like also a long history of genocide of indigenous people there. It's just generations of darkness there, and these people go there and have fun and really enjoy it. It's insane.
It's so true as well that the Western is probably the quintessential American genre, you would argue, and you know, I think even back in the sort of 70s and 80s, there was very much a sort of concern about, you know, creating revisionist narratives where the Native Americans were given a voice and stuff like that. And it's almost as if we've gone past that. It's like, oh no, let's go back to you know, theme park Western kind of approach. And there is that parallel. If you think about what Scorsese has been criticised for recently, about talking about the relationship between movies and theme parks. And it's almost, I sort of, that popped into my head when you know, we were looking at this theme park Western scenario, and how that does sort of sublimate all of these darker aspects that are underneath, and it's amazing how you sort of draw them out.
Well, there's an analysis of this exact thing. Umberto Eco wrote a book called Travels in Hyperreality. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Back in my PhD days.
Right, yeah. So right after I had this experience, I got that book, and I mean, he explains it better than I ever could. But these are the kind of ideas that I was thinking about, like this preoccupation with a reality that's more accurate than the historical facts of the situation, which is completely relevant to the whole fake news, everything. Like that's basically what it is. They're recreating a history and modifying the facts to be more true than true for really insidious ends, you know. And it was really interesting to read that book, and it feels prescient because it's like he's making parallels between our preoccupation with recreating history in the United States, you know, all the way back to The Last Supper. You can find hundreds of recreations of The Last Supper throughout the United States, and some of them are animatronic and all these other things. And then through like Disneyland, It's a Small World, and all these things where that is now considered the more accurate history. It's considered more accurate than what actually happened, which is it's a mind fuck. It's a hell of a thing to think about, and the whole thing feels like a Twilight Zone episode, you know, recreating the same murder over and over and over and over and over, and making it more accurate than the actual murder that occurred on that exact property.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's such a fascinating subject, and I think your work really does a great job in sort of pointing out in interesting ways where these contradictions lies and things that we think about, you know, as just being taken for granted. Oh, that is American culture. No, somebody has created that story, and it tells us something. It's an ideology.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's propaganda.
Yeah. Well, it's always really nice to get a filmmaker on with a unique sensibility, I think, and we'll link to your films on the website when we put this out. But Dan, thanks very much for talking to us.
I really appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you.
In June, I went back to Colorado to capture footage of a ghost town called Deerfield for a friend's documentary. I also spent Father's Day with Andy for the first time in at least 20 years. According to a monument donated by a petroleum corporation, Deerfield was an African-American agricultural colony founded by Oliver Toussaint Jackson in 1910. It thrived and reached a population of over 200, but was decimated by the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. By 1946, it had only one resident. The tradition of making black folks feel unwelcome in communities they built continues in Colorado to this day.
So we're back on The Cinematologist with Christine Franz, who is the producer and director of Bunch of Kunst, the film about the Sleaford Mods. So welcome, Christine. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Obviously, the screening of the film was last night in the Bear Club across the way, which is the jazz club which is associated with the festival, of course. And I think it seemed to me that was an amazing atmosphere in which to watch that film. So how was it from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I was super happy when I found out that it's going to be screened there, because I think that's the perfect fitting for the film. I always intended it to be screened in a sort of club situation, you know, because I think that it's got a lot of energy to it, and that just works better in that sort of environment, and, you know, where people know you can have a drink. And, you know, it was really quite fitting, and it was packed. It was such a nice screening. Yeah, and a
nice sort of raucous in a good way atmosphere, which obviously is sort of in keeping with the subject matter. So tell us a little bit about the film and the Sleaford Mods and how the project came together, because I remember I can't remember if it was sort of a year and a half ago when there was a sort of more mainstream explosion of this band. I think there was a BBC film about it and that kind of thing, but this is very different. So tell us about this project.
I mean, I'm a Berlin-based music journalist, and I work for French and German TV for their weekly music program, and that's how I first met them in, I think, 2014, which is almost 5 years ago, isn't it? Yeah. So it's incredible. So they came to Berlin really early on. We got on really well and did an interview, and then after that we decided there's so much more to it. We have to find out what they are all about, what Nottingham is like. So we went over there, got really drunk, had lots of fun up there, and so it was and took it from there, really. I mean, we thought we were probably gonna just follow them around for the small town tour that they did in early 2015, when they were mainly playing places that wouldn't normally be on any band's list, you know, and we thought that's just a great concept for a tour. Just go to the smaller places, where there's so much love for the band. So we followed them around, and then at some point they got booked for Glastonbury, and we thought, we can clearly see it. They go on stage at Glastonbury, and then the credits roll, and that's kind of the film. But luckily, it turned out like completely different, and things kind of really picked up after that Glastonbury performance, and we thought there's no way that we can stop here right now, but we have to keep going for a bit longer, because there was you can totally see that there was momentum there. And we wanted to get that in the film.
What were some of your concerns in terms of the way you wanted this to come across as a music documentary? I mean, obviously that term you can apply to loads of different types of films, and I suppose there is a danger that you can fall into kind of like, Anvil territory or something like that. And but I think there's a sort of real important sort of political underpinning to the band and to what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when we started out, we wanted the film to actually reflect the rawness of their music, and that was sort of the main idea. And what I had in mind was films such as Sounded Out, Jeannie Finley's film, which I was super happy that it was programmed the same day, because that was a big inspiration. Something that doesn't force anything onto you, something. I don't know, something that like people that it's not really about the music, but it's more about the people and their kind of story, and that was the one thing. And then obviously that kind of Brexit referendum looming in the background, that was another thing. I mean, obviously we don't talk about that in the film directly, but I think that kind of served as a backdrop to that as well, because I mean, here was a band that kind of clearly put that whole frustration into songs, and songs that even work on a European stage. People maybe not don't fully get the lyrics, but they definitely they are into that kind of energy and the frustration. They can feel that anger, and I think that's what it's all about. So that was kind of the idea, to make a film as raw as that and kind of try to translate that into the film.
So I can't not ask you about sort of Iggy Pop in the film. I know it's kind of like maybe not the aim of the film, and sometimes when a big star comes in and sort of says, this band is great, it can be a bit of a cliche, but I think it works in this regard, because Iggy does seem to have a real sincere appreciation of what this band is.
Absolutely. And so the whole Iggy thing, luckily, I think came along quite late in the film. I mean, he was always sort of promoting the band and playing them on his Six Music radio show, and so that was great, but at first it didn't seem like a thing that's going to happen, this interview, because I mean, I met Iggy Pop's producer at a gig in Cologne. He was standing in front of me, and he was like, I'm working for this radio program on Six Music, and so we stayed in touch. And then at some point he said, would you be interested in an interview? And I was like, yeah, sure, I mean, that would be amazing. But I felt the same way. I felt like I didn't want it to become a Talking Heads film where other people tell us how great this band is. I think it's more about, you really have to feel how great they are, and so but in the end we got the chance to interview him, and so we flew to Helsinki. They were playing the same festival than Iggy, and he was just such a fanboy, but in such a beautiful way, and it was just absolutely incredible. I mean, I was saying last night that he just turned up in his yoga pants, and he had Jason's book ready, and he was quoting from the book, and it was just amazing. I think he is the loveliest person you could ever imagine, and he came across as a real sincere fan of their music, and I think that was the beauty of it. And once we shot that interview, we knew that we had like the perfect ending to the film.
Brilliant. And you, I mean, you were saying at the Q&A last night, though, you were worried about him burning through the the budget, but gladly that didn't happen.
So we and the funny thing about that was that we couldn't afford a hotel, so we stayed up all night and spent all night at this festival, and flew back, and we were completely hungover. And the next day, I had this voice message on my mobile. I was like really sleepy and checked my mobile, and then it was Iggy who phoned me via his manager saying, thanks for making this film, I'm really looking forward to it. And I was like, what?
That's amazing.
Nobody's going to believe me, but so I'm glad that he left that message.
Great. I was just wondering what you thought. I mean, I don't know what you've seen at the festival itself, but it seems to me one of the things that sort of underlying, and I think it's probably the link that Neil has with music documentaries, it's one of his big things, but also it seems to be a wider theme in popular culture maybe now, this sort of return to or utilisation of kind of DIY, what would have been called previously DIY culture, analogue technologies, if you think of Mark Jenkins' film, if you think of Sounding Out. And I was just wondering where you think that comes from. Is it a part of this sort of dissatisfaction with everything being overly produced, or we're all online all the time and we're all searching for if you use that problematic word authenticity, but we're all looking for something that is a little bit more kind of meaningful, or even sort of material in the tactile way rather than the commercial way,
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same. I was just talking to Jake, the director of the amazing Milford Grace film, Filmantis, and we were just saying the same thing, that I think, especially with the music documentaries, the Shirley Collins one, the Milford Grace one, and ours probably share that. I think the way that they were produced is that they really reflect the music in their own way, and the Shirley Collins one was like super poetic, the Milford Grace one is like an essay, and ours is super raw, just like Sleaford's music. And I think that's what they all share. And I think it's just like we were also, or at least speaking for myself, I was super bored with like Talking Heads archive footage documentaries, and I think there's been so many of these films, and obviously they work and they find their audience, which is a great thing, but I also love the films that find that specific angle and that come a bit closer to their subject, even though there might be a shaky camera or like a rough edit or something, but there's definitely some more authenticity to it, like you said, and
also keep it away from the kind of formulaic nature of you need to get this, and this in, which seems now to me almost you can see when that's happening on screen a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's amazing to see that, and Neil and Justin, they had, I think they brought together a really great selection of films that just do that kind of thing. They work in a different way, They don't follow that formula maybe thing.
And do you think that, where do you see the sort of standard of the films here? Because it's I think that Justin and Neil, they do have this sensibility of trying to get the best work into the festival, but also championing work that is maybe a first short or a first feature or something that has promise. I think there's that sensibility as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably more daring films, even films that are a little bit left of center. I think, and films that clearly were made, with lots of sort of love and maybe a different angle to what you would normally see. I think that's what they all share, and
Right. And are you working on anything now? Have you got something in the pipeline?
Well, I've got a few ideas here and there floating around, and I'm at the very early stages of pitching those ideas. And so, I hope, fingers crossed, I hope something will come off of it.
Great. Christine, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
It's two guys stood on stage, and it's pure, and it's like, and you can't with it.
In the deep, caverns of small towns in England, that is where great music exists.
The smell of is so strong it smells like decent bacon. Kevin's getting footloose on the overspill underneath the station.
They are a voice of Britain. They tell
what Britain is like at the moment.
If you were on like £15 a week and you turn the telly on and some spouting on about love, you know, with a guitar in the middle of a forest, I mean, that's just
It's a band that on paper shouldn't really appeal to people, but it does.
Keeping out the film.
Yeah, there's a band with old men.
We both felt like we've not fit in anywhere.
Okay, I'm here with Toby Matthews at Filmstock Festival. Toby, congratulations on the film. Welcome. Thanks for coming on The Cinematologist.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
You had your screening last night. How did you feel about it? It seemed to get a good reception. Really enjoyed the film.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. I think it's interesting because I've seen it with a couple of different audiences now that don't know anything about it and don't know what to expect.
Right.
And it always takes a bit of time for them to warm up and realise that they're meant to, that they can laugh.
Gotcha.
A bit.
So the film's called Holiday, and it was filmed in Mousehole in Cornwall. So are you a film at Falmouth person, or do you live down there? What's your sort of connection to the area?
I studied in Falmouth, studied film there, so this is my graduate film.
Cool.
I've since gone home. I've bought a van. I'm doing it up at the moment. Then I'll go back down to Cornwall. So it's like when I'm not there, my heart is there.
Okay.
It's there. Something's there.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, it seems that you've got a very interesting sort of, you're familiar with the area and you understand the sort of mentality of the people there and even the sense of humour, I think. So, tell us a little bit about the film itself.
It's quite a gentle sort of physical comedy. I've been watching loads of Jacques Tati films around that summer before when I had to start thinking about what film I was going to make for my graduate film. And so I found that was kind of how I was seeing the world, in these kind of just picking out little things in the street, watching everyone all the time.
Right.
And then when I thought, it was kind of last-ditch attempt, like I've got to come up with an idea now, because I'd been away on Erasmus in France. So I came back and they were suddenly like, you have to come up with a film now. So I just thought, why not? Let's do it. Do a comedy film. I've always loved Buster Keaton. I grew up on Laurel and Hardy, and it's just like a real natural mode for me. Is that kind of physical and without words. Anything without words, I'm very comfortable with, I think.
Yeah, and I think and Cornwall, I think, is really interesting as a sort of area because there are, having lived and worked down there myself, it's. There's a lot of eccentric characters around, and you can bump into people, and you sort of utilise that a little bit.
Yeah, small seaside towns, you get the best, interesting, most interesting characters for sure. I'm from the New Forest, which is not too much of a stretch, small rural town, sort of by the sea. So I kind of maybe that's why I feel like I understand the. I don't know what it is, but it's very gentle, light-hearted, and it's more of a portrait of the town rather than a comedy or there's not much of a story really.
No, but it's Tati inspired, and you've got this sort of leading character who, plays that sort of genial comedy character, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got his own kind of. He's just trying to get a little ice cream, have a nice holiday.
Right.
But I wanted the camera to kind of get distracted almost. I wanted the audience to be able to pick out jokes and feel like they're not being shown something that they have to see. They kind of choose where they want to look. That was the aim anyway. Yeah. But yeah, I also didn't want to impose my own idea of what this town was onto Mousehole. And so we cast about 5 of the characters. There's about 20 or 30 people that appear in it, but most of them were just the residents of Mousehole that we would just run up to just before we did the shot, whatever, and ask them if they could get involved. And they're all so up for it.
Great.
Quite embarrassed at first, but when they sort of eased up. But I thought that was better than... They're much more interesting characters as well than getting someone from somewhere else and someone else from somewhere else and shoving them all into this town.
Right.
And saying this is what Mousehole is, because we named it as well, so it felt a bit dishonest.
Yeah. You always got to be, I think, a little bit careful if you're coming in and sort of, especially with a comedy, sort of projecting an idea of a place, which can be a bit problematic,
especially
can't it?
I'm not Cornish. And
Yeah.
But also, there's some kind of documentary shots in there as well, like a couple of shots at the start. The people don't know they're being filmed. There's a few shots where people don't know they're being filmed, but they're some of the funniest. Some weird little things happen if you just film someone for a while.
Did you write the script as sort of scenarios rather than, obviously because there's no dialogue, it's not dialogue at all, but dialogue heavy at all. What was your sort of process there?
Well, I had the Bingo, the main guy, his sort of line throughout the film, his sort of trajectory, and then I had these other characters that weaved through and wanted them to cross paths and catch those moments where they intersect. And so there was a few kind of recurring characters, but then I would just be thinking about things and I'd write them down. I had a book full of notes of little ideas and stuff, and so I'd write them out on bits of paper. And some of them, the jokes that didn't push the story forwards, I could kind of rearrange and mix and match. But there were some that were more tied into how they physically interact. A lot of it we tried to do without cutting, so we'd have them interact like a choreography or something, like a dance in the shot. But no, I did just keep. I mean, we were writing stuff while we were filming, which was quite stressful for the cameraman. But sometimes we'd just go like, wait, we're going to film over here, we've got an idea, this guy there, he's been perfect for this joke, or like, this person said they want to be in the film, so we'd come up with jokes for that. Yeah. So it was a real spontaneous kind of atmosphere, and I hope that the intention was that maybe that energy would come across.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely does.
I think if you're having fun while you're making it, that kind of, it's important for a comedy anyway, but that you can see that.
Sure. Were you worried about it, like, because it's your final film before graduation, were you sort of worried about, oh God, this has got to kind of come together in the edit afterwards? Because if you're sort of improvising, you haven't got a shot list and coverage and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I edited it, so I had a rough idea in my head, or pretty exact idea, really. What's going to lead on to what and which shot's going to be like I don't know. I just had a good feel for it, so there wasn't any communication. I didn't have to tell an edit, have some editor come in. And like,
that's like auteurism writ large, I suppose.
Maybe, yeah. Did all the sound as well. We did it was all post-synced. We did Foley for it. Me and George, the sound man.
Cool.
So yeah, every footstep, every voice, including the child's, that's me.
Right. Oh, right. Okay.
So every sort of sound and everything, we created it, and that was a really interesting thing because you get to choose what people look at. So if you omit a lot of noise and just put some in,
it directs the vision.
Their eyes.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of student filmmakers kind of realise, maybe after the fact. You know what I mean?
When you really create every single sound, it's totally. You look at sound in a totally different way. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, totally glad it came out. As I said yesterday, that it was shot on film that was about 20 years old. As I said, but so we tested one of the rolls of it, but it wasn't all from the same stock. So.
Yeah, it's got a beautiful filmic quality. The grain texture to it is really, really nice.
Yeah, well, we didn't know it was going to come out at all. So the fact that there is a film, I'm just glad of that.
And did you have that? Was that sort of always in mind? You were like, oh no, I want to shoot this on film, so it does have that kind of like old French, maybe, tatty.
It felt right. It felt like I'd always wanted to try and shoot on film. I felt like if any film was the one to do it on, this seemed like a perfect. I don't know. There's something about if you dress someone the same way as people dressed 100 years ago, or if you shoot using the same material as they made films on 50 years ago, you can kind of see it more clearly in the lineage of the progression of that, and it just felt like I don't know, the best silent films were the old ones that shot on film, and it just
Wonderful. Well, thanks for talking to us. We better stop now because the car engine has just come up behind us as running. But I appreciate your time. What have you got coming up next? Have you got any more projects?
Yeah, I'm editing a film at the moment. It's like a half-hour mystery film about it's like a guy, a bit of a drunk. He's come home. It's not. It sounds like it's based on sort of autobiographical. Come home from uni. He quit. He's a dropout, and he came back home to his parents' house. But they're not there. It's just like. Got a pretty miserable life, and he's drinking, and he starts to black out and wake up with these like notes written on him, and strange objects in his pocket and stuff like that. And he tries to start, as he pieces together the events of the night before, he gets sucked into this weird world of small town crime and stuff.
Oh wow, sounds interesting.
Yeah, right.
Sounds like some Memento-esque maybe.
Yeah, maybe not really Memento. More like it's like a drunk version of. Big Lebowski or or something.
Great.
Like that.
Well, thanks very much for talking to me.
Cheers. Thank you.
So we're back on the Cinematologist podcast with Gillian Harker. Welcome, Gillian. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So obviously you are the writer, director and actor in your film Cross. So and that screened the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel that went? I mean, I feel like, because I was in the screening and obviously there was 6-7 other films, but you were the only filmmaker there, so there's a lot of pressure on.
I know. I was so emotional that day because so Luton is my hometown. I was born and raised here, and I used to go to a youth drama club, and we would rehearse in the old version of the Hat Factory.
Okay.
And you know, you have these dreams as like a 15-year-old, and you're a bit naive as well. I think when I was 15, I just assumed I'd have an Oscar by the time. This point. Yeah, exactly.
Rehearsing like Kate Winslet and that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I think I wrote some speeches. But it was really emotional, actually. I had a few friends, had my mum come down, and I also have such a fear of public speaking.
Okay.
And so when Neil Fox gave me the microphone, there's no other filmmakers there. It was such a lovely audience though, and you know, you never know how. None of my friends are filmmakers. The bunch that came on Friday. And so I wasn't sure how they were gonna take it.
Sure.
But they really enjoyed the experience. They really enjoyed the films that were shown, and you know, afterwards there was one of the films set in the art gallery.
Yeah.
And they're sort of dissecting what the art pieces mean, and I think sort of the gag is. Or laughing at the sort of pretension of afterwards.
Conceptual art.
I was in the lobby afterwards, and we were talking about some of the films, and they're all looking to me for answers. I found myself just reaching for random adjectives to try and describe. But they really enjoyed it. I think all of them were saying it's such a fantastic thing to bring to Luton, because it's made me Filmstock. It's made me realise that there is such a hub and a community here wanting good film, independent film, and. I know Filmstock had been done before, 10 years ago, and it had been successful then, but I would have been completely unaware of any of that.
Yeah.
I
think audiences are sometimes underestimated, because we were talking the other day how your friends and everything came out, and they were kind of like really getting into what all of these shorts mean, and like maybe you wouldn't associate just sort of people who would normally go see a mainstream movie wouldn't be interested in that kind of thing. But I think that sometimes the industry underestimates what people want.
They absolutely do underestimate, and I've had so many conversations in this week alone about when you're a filmmaker or an actor or whatever actually industry you want to go into. When you're from and when I say this, I say it with the most love. I'm so proud of being from Luton. But there is definitely a stigma of being from a working class town, and some of that, stigma we put on ourselves as well.
Yeah.
And I think that there is this feeling that certain towns won't understand art and culture, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's rubbish.
So obviously you came down to Brighton and we talked about your film, seen it 2 or 3 times now, but for the audience, the film's called Cross, and you want to give us a sort of summary and tell us how the development of why you wanted to tell this story.
So it's about a couple. It's just a 2-hander, and they've been together a while. They're in a very good place in their relationship, but it's the story's about him. He has this secret that he's kept from her for a while. Shall I reveal the secret?
Well, it's up to you. It's your film. You know what I mean?
I'm getting used to all of this. Anyway, for those that want to see, I won't reveal it just yet. But she comes in one day in the middle of him doing something, and it's about his shame and how she deals with it. And for me, it was I like to think I'm a very liberal, accepting, open person. I try to put myself in other people's shoes, but the reality is if I was confronted with certain things, how would I really deal with it?
Yeah.
Especially if it was someone that I'd been with for a while and they'd kept something from me. There's that sort of trust issue. But ultimately, she finds a way in the film to
sort of reconcile the...
It was important for me not to have a tied up, neat ending.
Sure.
Because I think with it's a 10-minute film. There's nothing you can't tell a complete story in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a relationship drama. So the ending's not necessarily ambiguous, but I don't want the intention to be that it's like a happily ever after. It's definitely we're going to work I want you to open up to me. I'm going to provide a safe space for us to be able to discuss and move forward, and hopefully that came across anyway. The inspiration, I wish I had a more intelligent answer for this. I'm an actor. I was struggling to get acting work or anything remotely interesting, and I just knew that writing something for myself would be the way forward. And then kind of got to the point where I thought, do I direct it as well? And then this idea kind of popped into my head. I think when you're a writer, when you want to create stories, you always have a million different stories and ideas going through your head. And what I've realised, you learn a lot about yourself when you're making a film. I'm so scared of committing to anything, because as soon as you commit to something, you risk failure.
Yeah.
And but I just panicked. On my birthday last year, actually, I went out with a friend who's an actor for dinner, and we were just chatting, and I was like, no, this is the story I'm going to tell, and this is it. And I think there's a danger as well of putting the great before the good. I have such high levels of tastes. Stuff that I love watching is just from the greats, and obviously I'm not at that level yet where I can match what I love watching.
I find that very hard myself when it's kind of like, there's people out there, maybe not in filmmaking, but just in kind of like academic life. It's just like there's people up here and you're down here, and it's kind of, what's the point of you doing anything because there's this here, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but then they've got there because they've been where we are. And so that's a sort of a motto I want to keep with me. Don't put the great before the good. A great actor that I really admire said that to me, and I was like, oh wow, okay. Someone that I look up to is like, has the same kind of motto. It's
and there's a lot of mediocre stuff that's up there as well that gets seen and stuff like. You've got to remember that.
This is the other thing, and that comes down to nepotism. If you're from, if you're in a certain circle, I think mediocre work is often celebrated. Which is a completely different conversation, and I rant for like so long about that when I get on my little soapbox about it. But and I'm not saying like, my film's the best thing ever, but it's it's a starting point.
Sure.
And it's given me, more than anything, it's given me the confidence to think, because I always had this mentality, and I think it's part of the sort of Luton mindset as well that you grow up in, this sort of...
There's a boundary, there's a limit, or you need to try and get past that.
And I've had so many conversations this weekend, and so many people have that same feeling, and it's I would always have that thought in my mind. I'm not the sort of person that does that. I'm not a director. I'm not this. I'm not that. I still struggle, like when you introduced me just now, writer, actor. I'm like, well, not really. But you just have to own it, and what other people think about me isn't my concern. It's taken me a long time to realise that,
But what did you bring? So what did you bring then as an actor into the kind of role of director, or was this a sort of sense that you were you were acting in it, but really it was about sort of finding what it means to be a director, in your first project kind of thing?
So any film that I love, it's always been the character and the acting that has drawn me in. Absolutely. I mean, and I just knew. I mean, my film has very little dialogue, and it's not a flashy, showy film. I still need to get to grips with like the technical side and the film grammar and all that kind of stuff. It's a very simple setting. There's no scene has more than 3 shots. But it was really important to me that the actor I had, and the actor I had, Ryan Hayes, is incredible. I think he's one of the best actors working at the moment. And we did a lot of workshop rehearsal, which helped with my script writing as well, because the first draft was terrible. It was just words, words, and it's just over-egging the pudding.
Explain that. This is what's happening.
Why are you wearing this? And so we did a lot of workshop rehearsal. We had to really trust each other, because there's it's a couple that's been together for a while, and I was just lucky that he was such a great. For me, I love naturalism in performance, and I think he brings that.
Because it's very difficult, I think, in maybe even more difficult in a short film to have that believable intimacy that a couple has. Do you know what I mean? I think that's probably the strongest part of the film, where you're kind of like say to yourself, you can sort of see where the actors are acting in a relationship rather than they are just present in the relationship. Do you know what I mean?
It was quite odd because, like, on a personal level, I've been single for like 6 years now, so like I'd sort of kind of in a way forgotten what it was like, because kind of you sort of, I don't know, you spend so much time by yourself that you kind of forget. Not forget, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot of trust to be able to open yourself up to that. But we worked really well together, and I like that those scenes come across well. I mean, I hate public displays of affection or anything like that, so I did find it quite tough to do that stuff. I had all my crew, like I was so lucky with the crew that I had on set. They were all vastly more experienced than I was, but they were just very kind, and my producer, my first AD, had to keep things quite strict, and they were dealing with the schedule, and because I very easily would just forget that we'd had to move on to the next shot. But I'm the sort of person, I would have done 12 takes if I can, and I wouldn't have been happy with any of them. Right. But actually,
help you move the process forward.
Yeah, absolutely. But there was something beautiful in the improvisational nature, just letting the camera sort of sit and pick up. Right. But and it all came down to trust between me and that actor.
Right. And obviously you were talking about the other night, and it's screening, your family was there and stuff like that, and there's always a sort of fear and emotionality around that. But how is it seeing a short film in a block of other short films? Because that's always interesting to me, because you want to, you're happy for other film, you see other films, that's a really great film, but there's always this sort of nervousness, like, how does that stack up against my film and all this, there's a little bit of internal competition there, isn't there, always,
I'm so glad you said that, because also I find that I pre-apologise things, and again it's the sort of like imposter syndrome Jill that comes out. So all of my friends and family that came, I would always, and even when I was first showing the film to people, I would say, it's only my first film. And someone literally had to, not literally slap me across the face, figuratively slap me across the face, and they stopped doing that. Apologising. Because it's annoying. And but I was finding myself still doing it. I kept saying, it's not really your thing. And I was chatting to a guy last night, actually, who he's been at the whole festival, and I've kind of never really chatted before, but he's sort of been on the Luton scene. He was saying that, if you're in a band and you're bringing your mates to see a band, and it's part of, you're doing one song and there's like 20 other songs. You have no control over what those other things are. So I found myself sort of pre-apologising, but then, I thought it was a great selection of films.
There's been quite a lot of films, not, I'm not going to say the same, but they're dealing with this sort of sense of a relationship, and in various different kinds of relationships, but also the things that change those relationships. I think there's been quite a few films around that, even if it's just two friends or if it's two partners or whatever,
I think, for me, when it came to making this film, I knew that I needed to keep the parameters very tight. I no more than 2 locations. I knew it had to be a two-hander. What kind of story could I tell? I knew that there had to be, with any short film, one character needs to learn something. In my case, both have sort of learned something. And when you've got a two-hander, it's going to be a relationship of some kind, and for it to be interesting and engaging, something needs to happen for them to come to a crossroads, and there needs to be a decision. So, I think that's probably. I think there's quite a few first-time filmmakers here. I think. And I think it's a natural when we're just trying to. Well, I feel when you're just trying to feel your way through, you want to keep it very, very controlled and very simple, and the easiest thing is conflict in a relationship, I think.
And just finally then, obviously you said at the beginning you're from Luton, and this is an event that is sort of ingrained in Luton. I mean, Neil and Justin have done these idents at the beginning where it's kind of satirically taking the piss out of Luton and stuff, and there's a sort of, they're so good, aren't they?
But there seems to be something about, it's not a defensiveness, but it's kind of like a recognition of the festival is in a place where the place is sort of, it feeds into what this festival is trying to be. So I don't know whether you sort of feel that, or coming from Luton, what kind of that's about,
Yeah, I mean, I am absolutely incredibly proud of being from Luton now, and I hope no one's going to take this the wrong way, but I definitely had a feeling growing up that, rightly or wrongly, when you think you know everything, when you're like 15, 16, I just absolutely felt this need to escape, because I didn't see what was here. I hope no one from Luton listens to this and hates my guts. I have to reiterate, I'm so proud of being from, I shout it from the rooftops now. Because, I remember having a, careers day at school, and I was so excited because I just thought, she's going to tell me how to be an actress. And I turned up, and it was this little cupboard in our school, and I think she was an external woman that had come in, and she said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be an actress. And she had no idea how to advise me. She was fumbling. She said, and she suggested drama teaching. Which there's absolutely nothing wrong with drama teachers. I learned from drama teachers, but it
puts it in a box, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And she just, there was nothing open to me. It felt, it was, if you want to be a doctor, nurse, teacher, and they're absolutely worth, they're amazing professions, but it was very different to what I wanted to do, and it felt so alien. And you've got, there was not much theatre. I think every theatre show I ever saw, professional, was always in London, and then the train ticket and the actual theatre ticket was incredibly expensive. So it's a very complicated issue, but there was definitely a feeling for a while among like a few of us that there was just nothing going on that was exciting in Luton, which was completely wrong, because Filmstock was actually happening, obviously, for years and years and years. And there was, I was part of a drama club. There was stuff going on.
But you can't see it sometimes, can you?
And it doesn't help when the government are making cuts to every single council in the country. So the bottom line is now I'm incredibly proud of Luton, and I think there are really exciting things happening. There's another Luton festival as well, film festival, that I think is at another point in the year. So I think there's really exciting things, and it's such a great location as well. Half an hour you're in central London. Anyway, I'm rabbiting on, but
well, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm talking now with Edwin Miles, the filmmaker of Rose, which is screening at Filmstock where we are. Edwin, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
No problem at all. So this is your graduate film, am I right in saying that?
It was used for my dissertation project, as part of my dissertation project from the MA at the University of Bristol. So,
great.
It was part of a practice as a research project, really.
And how's that structured in terms of, do you have to write a theoretical aspect of it and then make the film, or is it sort of vice versa?
Yeah, well, there are ways you can go around it. Due to time constraints that I had, I made the film first, then wrote a kind of companion dissertation piece.
Okay.
But we had to kind of approach it knowing that the two pieces work together, really. So we did all the research. Well, I did all the research and the kind of theoretical background before going into the film, so I could apply it to the filmmaking, which generally is how I like to approach films anyway.
Right.
Kind of make a film born of some kind of theory or philosophical thought.
Right.
And in the case of Rose, it was based around kind of film composition, film form, and in this case it's a combination between moving image and still photography, and the film kind of explores that and experiments with those two visual mediums.
And the Rose of the title is obviously your grandmother, so
yeah.
I mean, were you sort of
did you think to yourself for a long time you wanted to make something about, because interesting, I don't want to say it's a character, but in a way, from an outsider's perspective, everyone's a character, but obviously not a character to you, an intimate part of your life.
Yeah, but I mean, I had made a short documentary called Hello Grandma about her a few years previous when I was in Falmouth, which used home video, and it was kind of structured around this phone conversation I had with her, which kind of explored aging, memory, nostalgia, those kind of themes. But because it was so short, I felt like I kind of skipped over those themes way too quickly. So in my mind, I always wanted to go back to talking about my grandmother. So that's why I went back to her, because she was in my mind. I like these kind of films or documentaries that look at family members, as I say, like kind of introspective, but using those people that are immediately in front of you as a way to explore yourself as well and explore place. So as I moved to Bristol as well from Falmouth, and I live in the West Midlands, is where Rose is set. So I was going through this whole kind of time where I didn't really know who I was, didn't know where I belonged, didn't know, I missed Falmouth, missed home, was enjoying Bristol, was getting prepared to move to London. So this whole kind of, I was looking back at myself, seeing like who am I, which kind of just naturally led to my grandma. Seeing her as a character, I kind of like that audiences do that.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be this perceived as a home video.
Sure.
I want it to be seen as like a film in itself.
And what were the things about her that you thought, actually, this is going to be interesting to an audience outside of myself? And were you ever sort of worried, though, that you were kind of like, well, this is just my grandma and I'm interested, but why the hell is there anybody else going to be,
Yeah, that's probably that. I was very worried.
Right.
That was a huge problem for me to kind of get over that barrier.
Yeah.
So I love these kind of films that look at family members. I can't remember the title of one, but there's one by a British filmmaker who made one about her grandfather, but found out he was like the most famous musician in Africa or whatever.
Okay.
So obviously the grandfather's famous. That's why it's important.
Yeah.
And I like Chantal Akerman's No Home movie, which is just about her mother. But I think it's her last film. So obviously Chantal Akerman is a hugely renowned filmmaker, so that's why
so they can get away with that easily enough.
So that's why we're interested, is because these people are already culturally important anyway. So I was like, what? And there was no kind of context really or anything to kind of explore in my family, but I always wanted to look at my family because I find them interesting. But I don't know, as a young person trying to make films, I try not to let it bother me too much. And one thing I try and kind of think when making films is, make the film for yourself first. If you can enjoy it, there's going to be a handful of other people that can enjoy it. And I mean, I love my grandma. She was well loved in the community anyway. I kind of just hoped that could translate.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways I think that does make it work is that you're not doing a sort of... It's not configured around a specific event, although there are, there's an important event at the heart of it, but it's not chronological, not linear in that sense. It's sort of doing that thing that you're talking about in terms of wistfulness and dealing with like fractured memories or memories that people have that are personal, and where do they come from, and how much do they correlate to an objective reality. So I suppose it's sort of dealing with a lot of those issues that documentary has as well, in terms of what is the truth of a document, and obviously you're saying that you're basing this on a sort of theoretical background. I mean, what's your sort of feeling about the ways documentary, particularly in today's age where everybody's got a camera on their phones and stuff, is documentary kind of like something different perhaps in terms of this aspiration to an objective truth, or the problems with that, even trying to do that?
I mean, it's always going to have issues with that, but I feel the idea that everyone's a documentarian, I don't know too much whether that's true. I feel like documentary, what is documentary? So I saw Rose more as like this meditation on these themes, and for me it's more like an archival film.
Right.
For me personally, because obviously it's a family archive. but to an audience member, that's not going to be what it is.
Yeah.
Then it's going to be a documentary or some kind of meditation on themes of aging and memory and death and all that stuff. So even within Rose's context, it kind of is a documentary but plays on other things as well. So so I don't know. I don't know if that.
No, it's probably an overly elaborately worded question there on my part. One of the things I really liked about your grandmother, one of the things she said that sort of struck me was that getting to different ages and stages in her life and kind of realising, there's something new being 60, there's something new being 70. Yeah. It's not kind of like, it's just this you tend to think when you're younger maybe, it's this gradual decline. As I get past 35, it all goes to shit kind of thing. But that was really interesting, and I just wondered whether there was anything in the in filming of the documentary that came out of your grandmother or the way that she is that surprised you and sort of made you think, actually, you think these the people who are intimate to your lives, but the actual process itself may have brought something new out.
I mean, I knew her very well, so I mean, going into it, no, I don't think anything did surprise me. I mean, the way she dealt with her, she has an illness. She was terminally ill at the time I was filming it, and the way I always knew she'd had accepted it. But obviously, me being her grandson on the other side of the camera, I thought that would affect her more. And I thought it might be a bit more emotional. Because I think this was the first time she saw me, having me known that she's going to be ill, that she was terminally ill.
Right.
So I expected her to be a bit more reserved, maybe talk about it a bit more, maybe try and make me feel a bit more comfortable. But no, she was the same. She was that same kind of positive, vibrant, full of life person that she always was. So that surprised me. I mean, when making the film, there was one issue where we had to kind of. She was always trying to please me. She was always asking, "Am I doing it right?" And it's like,
right, okay,
It's like, Grandma, that's not.
You
just
be.
Do anything wrong. If anything goes wrong, that's on me. It's not on you. So that took time to get used to, or act as if the camera isn't there. But that, I mean, me being her grandson as well caused a different kind of dynamic. So it's not just a filmmaker filming a subject. It's a grandson filming a grandmother. Offered, I think, something a little bit different. Because she was even more aware that I was there, and my brother did some of the sound recording on some things as well.
Okay.
So there was this whole.
Just what you're saying there, it makes me think that there is some kind of unique dynamic, I think, between grandsons and grandmothers, and I don't know why, because I do feel it myself. And it's almost like sometimes, without sort of overly generalising, I think like sons have very difficult relationships with their fathers often. And then I think that maybe is sort of offset by the fact that they seem to have this sort of unique connection with grandmothers. I don't know whether you feel the same thing at all.
No, definitely. It's odd. I mean, I had a unique relationship with my grandma, partly because I'm the youngest of three brothers, and my other two brothers are so tightly born in the same space. So when they were young, they spent time with her as two. But then when they got older, they spent less time, and then I was... So I spent a lot of time with her by myself. So I had quite a close, unique relationship with her in terms of my family. And my granddad as well was a big kind of presence in the family as well. Rose's husband. So there was they meant a lot in terms of my family, and they were kind of these figureheads without overtly being figureheads. We kind of did revere them as that. And I think age anyway, there is that. There's an immediacy to our parents. My dad is my dad, and I see him every day. The fact we see grandparents kind of less frequently, and they're much older, and we can easily see that they're wiser.
And they forgive you a lot more, I think, maybe.
And they give us gifts and slip us fivers here and there. But and they kind of give us snippets of wisdom without realising it, whereas maybe the parental wisdom is kind of lost in the have you done your bed?
I think that's probably true. So have you got any other projects up and running, or are you working on something right now?
I've just finished a short documentary called Terminates at Wolverhampton, which is like an observational vignette chronicling the tram journey from central Birmingham to Wolverhampton. So that was completed and released about a month ago. Just finished shooting a short fiction film called Honeydew, which is kind of a crazy psychological chamber piece about a guy who believes he can see ants on his walls, so he puts out little honey pots to kind of attract them.
Sounds very surrealistic.
Yeah, but then he gets addicted to the honey as a kind of coping mechanism. It's kind of like Philip K. Dick meets Cronenberg.
Oh, brilliant!
So that's going to go in post-production when I get the tapes back, because I filmed it on mini DV.
Oh, okay, yeah. Which is an interesting aesthetic itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really cool. And I'm going to play with that a lot more.
Right.
Play with that with documentaries as well. And I mean, there's a long-term plan of making a follow-up to Rose, a bit more of a feature film maybe, which focuses more on my mum, more on my dad, and my family in general. You know, my mum and my dad, they're both retirees now.
Right.
My dad was a long-time market trader, and I want to take him to a market and just have him go off on one about the landscape of current market trading, because it's quite depressing having seen him. You could physically see the decline while he was working there.
Right.
And then kind of look at my mum as somebody who's mourning still, even like a year later, the death of her mum, and see how that has affected her and how that's kind of gone through the whole family. And then just look at family life anyway. I think it's
great.
To me, that kind of stuff is just fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think you've really got an eye and a sort of sensibility for that idea of time and memory, and then relationship to families, and then even sort of how that fits into changes in the wider context of the world and work and all these kind of things. So good luck with all your future projects.
No, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having a chat. It's great.
Great.
It's a very big change, isn't it, to be 93? But you don't realise, because it comes upon you suddenly. But it hits you a bit hard when you suddenly realise there's illnesses that you get that you don't expect. Some days I can't believe that I've got anything wrong with me, but some days I feel some pain that I know will come on because it's not got to its worst yet. But I know obviously it has got to get a lot worse. I've got the end of this year in my mind for no reason whatsoever. That's just my idea. But if I can go on longer, obviously I'm hoping, yes, I can. It will get more painful as it goes on, but I've got something to ease the pain. But I'm hanging on for that. I haven't resorted to that yet, but it will come naturally. But I've been well blessed all these years, haven't I? So, and I have a lovely family, a daughter that's very good to me, very, very, very good, looks after me, and 3 adorable grandsons, which I love very much. I lost my husband, unfortunately, with cancer, but he stood that very well, and I was able to nurse him. But he was a marvellous patient because he never grumbled. He stood it very well. So, all in all, I'm going to him, aren't I? So I can accept that. Because I have got great beliefs anyway. I do trust and believe, which does help when you're ill. It helps a lot. Because if you haven't got any faith, there's nothing to think about, is there? That's what some say to me. They're just dying. That must be an awful feeling. You just have to accept it, really. They all keep saying, and the nurses when they come, they can't get over how I have accepted it, but although it was a shock, in a sense, the shock was saying they couldn't do anything, but it's funny that I could accept it. But I think you work yourself up to it and you get ready for what comes along. As long as I can hang on, I'm going to hang on, aren't I?
So yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed those clips. We put some links up to the filmmakers involved so you can have a look at their work, and if you want to follow them or indeed get in contact with them to discuss or even, you know, talk to them about future projects, I'm sure they're all welcome that contact. So Neil, it was really nice to sort of hear you guys speak about, you know, the festival and its importance to you guys individually, and then what you think the relationship is to Luton itself. And you know, it was a really nice atmosphere with the final film, the Sword of Trust, which I think was a perfect final film to end on. You know what I mean? It was just really funny and not too heavy, but funny in a kind of like, yeah, we're all having a good time kind of way. But yeah, I was just wondering sort of the sort of importance really of this being in Luton and you guys being from Luton, and how that kind of sits to what you know, I don't know what the sort of sense of people who come from Luton think about the town, and maybe the self-consciousness they have about that. And I mean, I really loved the sort of idents that you had before each section. So there were these little clips of famous films or TV shows or, you know, news reports from back in the day just mentioning Luton. It really gives that sense of sort of the sort of knowingness I think that Lutonians seem to have about their sense of place.
Yeah, I think it's really important to us that Filmstock is in Luton, and that, I guess more broadly, that Justin and I do stuff in Luton and have always done stuff in Luton, and that Luton is at the heart of what we do, because it's, you know, I've lived in Cornwall for 6 years, and I've spent 6 years essentially. Well, I spent my whole life defending Luton, but you know, but I've spent 6 years kind of defending it from this thing of, you escaped.
Oh yeah,
And it's like, well, you know, and have you ever been? Oh no, I've been to the airport. You know, and there's this idea of Luton which is, you know, often true. You know, I've never been one to say, oh, Luton's amazing, and it's, you know, like, it has problems, it has issues, it has a history. But it's not what people think. I mean, I think everywhere's like that, but Luton gets a really, really bad rap for being, you know, a terrible place with terrible people and nothing going on and no culture. And it's just insulting, you know. And people seem to really get nasty and offensive when they know you from Luton, just in that way that is just really rude. You know, they'll just say things to you about your hometown. They've never met you. Literally, this is Neil from Luton. I once had a film critic say to me, you know, a high-level film critic he doesn't write anymore, but he wrote for like leading publications. I met him at a screening, and a friend of it said, this is Neil and Justin from Luton. And he literally said, I'm surprised you haven't been stabbed. And I was like, I don't know you. I've never met you. What gives you the right to say that to me? Like, that's what, if you're a Lutonian, that's what you face. That's what kind of drove the festival's start, was actually, we can have a world-class event in Luton. You know, we can show the world that Luton is not what you think it is. And we know that the people here are nice, good, interesting, smart, thoughtful people. And if you're not on board with that, then that's your loss, really. And a couple of things that people have said who haven't been to Luton, you know, who came to the festival, have said, you know, I was surprised that this happened in Luton. And you're changing people's perceptions of what a town is and what our town is. And I've missed that, you know, living in Cornwall. I've missed the people. I really miss Luton, you know, like, makes me sad when I go back and I look at it, because it's not a very attractive place, and no one's ever cared for it in terms of a civic sense of pride, but the people are amazing, and to see those people again and to have them come out and to spend time with them was just thrilling. In 2005 we did a Joe Strummer Film Festival in London, and we were at the Curzon Soho, and it was like a 5-day event, and it was successful in many ways, you know, but we were just like, I don't want to do stuff in London because people came for the screening and then they left. You know, and no one talked and no one hung around and no one was interested in knowing who anyone was, because it's different, you know. And I realised that there's nothing wrong with that. I go to events in London all the time when I'm back and I love it, but there's something about the fact that Luton doesn't have anything like this that makes it work, and that means that people will literally just rock up and talk to anyone. There's no sense of ego, really. And we've had a couple of bits of that in the past, but they don't last long. You know, they're gone quickly, because, you know, it presents itself as a place where, as welcoming and friendly, and people are just interested in people. They're not interested in glamour or ego. It's like, oh, you know, what have you got here? Have you got a film? Yeah, you know, I've got the Sleaford Mods film. You know, oh, okay, great. You know, it's not. It's just it's nice, and it's important to us that was retained. So coming back and being able to tap into that again and show people that, you know, that what Luton is capable of is was really, really important. Because I think we always thought that because nothing had ever come in the wake of Filmstock, there's never been anything like it in Luton. There's a few little things, but nothing like it. It was always like, well, no one cared. When it finished, no one cared. And to know that actually people remember it and do hold it in esteem and want to come out for it. People want to come out for it because they'd heard it was great. A lot of the filmmakers who came this year hadn't played before, but they admit they wanted to play Filmstock, and it hadn't been around for 10 years, and that says something. And that's all tied in with Luton. I don't think it would be the same if we'd have done it anywhere else.
Brilliant, yeah, and the venues themselves were really, really good. I think the 3 venues just sort of, did slightly different things. It's really interesting how venues sort of make a festival, I think, half the time. It's like, sort of comparing it to Berlin, but like half the beauty of Berlin is just bombing around to these different amazing cinemas. Do you know what I mean? It was just nice that, you had the sort of communal space and having the food on site, and you could buy a pass for food. That absolutely brilliant, really good. Just a word on Justin, because we were having a joke beforehand, but obviously he's your sort of friend from way back in terms of organising this festival. But what does he sort of? How do you guys work together? What's he? How do you sort of? I don't know, sync up in terms of getting everything done? And then how much did his partner having a baby the day before, or was it on the morning of? I didn't even know if it was the day before or the morning of the festival starting. Throw a spanner in the works.
So yeah, he had him and Kate had their second child, Ethan, about 3:00, I think it was, on the day that the festival started. So Dan Schneidkraut and I had popped out to walk my dog, Bailey. And I got a call saying it's happening. Everyone was fully aware that this might happen. And when we were kind of ramping up the organisation, he said, Kate's pregnant, and if the baby comes at the same time as Izzy, they're first, then it's going to be right in the middle of Filmstock. So we were like, good to know. And he said, and in classic Justin fashion, he said, so I might miss a few hours. And you just think that's insane and amazing. So he missed the opening, which I know he's very unhappy about. Just from a logistical point of view, he'd be very annoyed that he couldn't make that work. And because the panorama that we showed about Luton from the mid 70s was something that was he kind of discovered through a sort of a lot of local connections and was really wanted to show. But he was back there by the time Eddie Gomez was playing jazz for the second set at the Bear Club. So he missed, I think it was 7 hours. I totted it up. He was away from the festival, and then he was there for the rest of it, apart from a little bit on Sunday morning where there was, he missed something else because, again, it was a super busy week of kind of a momentous week and not all good for him in terms of family. They had some very bad news from Kate's side of the family on the Monday, when we were kind of ramping up to work on it, and then so he missed something. He missed a bit on because of that, which was, just as an aside, was kind of, the festival did remind us that it's 10 years, and that life has changed for a lot of us. And we went through the nostalgic photos, and some people aren't with us anymore, and that was sad. You realise that a significant amount of time has passed. So yeah, and those things were a kind of a reminder throughout. The baby and the other news were just a reminder of life. Everyone's 10 years older, kind of thing. But in terms of how we work together, it's difficult to. The delineation is kind of not always clear. What's clear is that Justin drives most of the vision stuff. Like he knows exactly how he wants it to look. And exactly how to put it all together. I think that's why he directs and I write in the filmmaking relationship. He's got a very clear sense of how to make it work, and wants to drive and be in control of that. And to be honest with you, ever since day one working with him, I've never wanted to encroach on that, because I think he is a visionary, and I love watching him. I love just watching him kind of put something together. And he works very closely with our designer, Chris, who did all the branding for... he did the branding for the venues when the venues were built, and has done the branding for us and the design for us, the graphic design for everything going way, way back. So he works very closely with him on kind of doing that. And then I just kind of basically say, yeah, this looks amazing. Let's do it. so what we kind of, how we divvy up stuff was different this time because we don't work together. But generally, it's everything's done together. All decisions are made together, and I can't keep up with his ideas. That's the thing, is that he's got so many ideas about everything, and like the idents and things like that. He was like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm like, okay, great. And then I see them, and I'm like, a week later, and it's like he's had them edited, and he's spoken to Chris, and Chris has done the thing, and then Stephen Worsley, who's our editor on Wilderness and other things, just says put that. I was like, it just looks great. So he just lives and works at such a pace. You'd have to ask him what I bring to it, but I know my value in it, and I know what I do that makes Filmstock what it is.
It seemed to me that you were more sort of like with people, let's say. Do you know what I mean? You were like, whether it's filmmakers or whether it's the staff, just making sure everybody's kind of like looked after all right, doing what they should be doing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of management. It's weird. What's weird is that Justin wanted to do more of that this time, because in the old days he would literally project everything. So for a lot of the time, in terms of the introductions and meeting people, he just wasn't around because he was running films, and then obviously life has got in the way this time, so he couldn't do as much of the hobnobbing and the schmoozing and the kind of welcoming as I do. But I write a lot of the content for the program, and kind of that's kind of and sequencing and kind of a lot of that kind of stuff is where I kind of come into it on the other side. And then at the event, it's kind of it's doing it's making it feel like Filmstock, So even when things are burning down behind the scenes, it's making sure that everyone's just having a good time all the time, and that is, that's I think where a lot of the reputation comes from. And on a day-to-day basis, it's hard to say because we've just done it for so long, and it was weird to do it again because we just clicked into, this is what we've always done. Hard to analyse, but a thrill to be doing it again, but to do it differently and to have so much of the last 10 years present in different ways was really great.
Yeah, well, it was an amazing event, and if I can be so bold, on behalf of, I think, everybody who attended, everybody who showed and sort of went there for the weekend, I think it was an amazing job by both of you. And I know people were asking about when will it be back, but you said not for a while. So is it just basically watch this space at the moment kind of thing?
Yeah, I've been saying watch the skies to people who've asked. I mean, we sort of mentioned at the closing film, that it won't be next year, but what it's done is it's shown us a way of doing it that we're very happy with, that we could enjoy, that doesn't feel nostalgic and doesn't feel like, look what we used to do. It felt present and modern, and and we thought, okay, it won't be 10 years before we do it again, and we'll be back, but it won't be next year.
Cool. Well, any final thoughts? Any thanks you want to give just before we sign off?
Thanks to everyone, really.
I know you did it at the event.
Did it the thing? Yeah, just thanks to everyone who came through, audience, filmmakers, sponsors. It was great because so many people made it great. And whatever we do that kind of gets people to do stuff is one thing, but people wanting to do it and just enjoying it was great. And thanks to you for your support, for allowing me to essentially be absent from much of the podcast for this season in terms of running events, to be able to running episodes and events, to be able to do this, and then to put a lot of the content out in this space is I'm really grateful for that, because I don't like the idea that it's all separate. I want there to be kind of connections between my filmmaking and programming and everything, and the podcast, because the podcast now sits at the center of my kind of creative life with you. So I feel very fortunate that you've been so supportive of me doing that, and also coming up and talking to filmmakers and hosting the Jenks Q&A and then putting so much stuff out into our stream is really nice. So thank you for everything.
Oh no, it's not even. Don't even mention it at all. It's my pleasure, and it was always going to happen that way. And actually, I was thinking, we should really go next year at some point up to the Bear Club and do a screening and Q&A there on a podcast from there with the two of us. That would be good fun, I think.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah, that'd be well up for that. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah,
cool. So I think we'll leave it there. Just to say, as normal, you can catch up with us on social media, on the email at cinematologist@gmail.com. If you have £2.50 spare a month to support us, you can go over to the Patreon page and get our bonus content. But until next time, this has been the Cinematologist Podcast. Thanks for listening.
They tumble and fight. They are beautiful. On the hilltops at night, they are beautiful. And blazing with light is the widest and the tallest and the biggest one. She's muscle